this one too. So,
Oy.
what are we looking
I
at here,
mean,
Cal?
at first glance, you're like, "What? That's not so bad." You have to
And
take a closer
then
look.
you look closer.
Yeah.
Zoom on in. So what we have here is we have.
Hey everyone, today is a special edition of the Installation Challenges video series here at In the Trenches. We're doing the second edition of grading camera installs. We've got some good ones, we've got some bad ones, and we've got some I don't even know what to say about them. So without further ado, here's our awesome panel as usual for these. Say hello.
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 And let's jump right into it now. Here is camera number one.
Love it.
Hmm.
Hey, I mean, drilling through those I-beams is extremely time consuming. So if we're, talking about labor hours, very smart here.
And there's significant dust on it, which means that this has held up for a while.
Yeah.
That was actually going to be my first question is, what mile per hour wind knocks this one down? What's the over under here? 40, 30?
I don't know. My wife has some of those clips she uses
They're
for
pretty
like
tough, yeah.
putting down stuff on her truck, and they're gnarly. Some of them are.
Believe they are
pretty,
called alligator clamps.
Yeah.
These are
I'm
even
gonna ask you
raised
later
camera.
where you found this.
Cal gave it to me.
I'll tell you.
But yeah, the dust that's actually first I was gonna ask what that is. Looks like some form of really extreme cobwebs. But another question I have about this one before we get into the grading and all that is
it
what's
plugged
that
in?
antenna looking thing coming off the
Well,
camera?
it's a wired wireless camera.
A wired wireless camera?
Yeah.
So the signal would be transmitted through the antenna, but the power is transmitted through that little
Yeah.
pigtail there that doesn't look to be plugged in. Yeah, you can
Is
see
it not plugged in, or is it just duct taped around the corner? Is that the deal?
I can't tell either way, but still, I mean, I'd like to know if it's working currently. That'd be a good judge for the grade.
There's no red light, so hard to tell.
Mhm.
Maybe it's just a
Red.
dummy camera. Maybe somebody just put this up to deter.
And they wasted all that money on alligator clamps.
Yeah.
Those aren't cheap.
Hey, you can buy a 5-pack at your local hardware store. Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what they charge, per hour, for tech labor. I mean, the alligator clamp might save you some money if you're doing 20 of these.
That's true.
Yeah. So, well, how would you guys grade this?
A
I
for
have to go
effort.
two different
No, I'm
grades.
just kidding.
Like one for creativity and then one for functionality.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm good at an A for creativity. That's something else there.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah,
this was I'm paying for somebody to put this camera up, this is an F.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
But if it's a DIY and the guy doesn't care, he just wants views, he did the job.
So what? C average.
Yeah.
Some ingenuity there. I think we can appreciate some ingenuity once in a while, which actually brings us to number two. So it seemed like we didn't like that one too much. But number two, let's take a look at this. This has quite a bit of ingenuity. I think Cal's pretty familiar with this one too. So
Oy.
what are we looking at
I
here,
mean,
Cal?
at first glance, you're like, "What? That's not so bad." You have to
And
take a closer
then
look.
you look closer.
Yeah.
Zoom on in. So what we have here is we have a PTZ on a mast mount with a long wall mount, no pole mounts, and another, turret style camera connected with that same NEMA enclosure. I think the reason that I forwarded this photo is just the wood block. Wood kills me. Anytime you install cameras with wood, it's a no-go for me.
Why'd they do that?
A little weather rot because the post
The
is too
pole's
small.
so small, and those they're not ratchet straps. What do you call them? The straps. won't
That-
tighten
so-
down far enough.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with our pole mounts, the pole or the mast that it's mounted to has to be at least 2 inches. And
3.
this
I
one
thought it was
looks-
3. That looks 2.
I think it's 3.
No, it might be 3.
could be wrong.
I could be wrong too.
Yeah,
Um,
and look how close though, that pole, the actual pole mount adapter on it that's hooked to the wood. If you look at the interior of it, it's not that far off. So
What
Yeah,
is going
pretty
on
good.
at the top of this?
Yeah,
This
that's I couldn't
mast?
quite figure out by the picture. What is, it's like-
transmitter, right?
I'm not critiquing. I'm just trying to understand. I don't understand it.
I think it's a transmitter, right?
what
I mean-
what? So you mentioned like that with that wood piece, going back to that a little bit too. What could be like you meant? Obviously, wood is going to rot over time. So eventually, is that PTZ just going to fall on the ground?
Well, I don't know if it'll fall to the ground, but
It'll start
get
going.
start moving, yeah, and sliding. And
Looks like we lost Cal. It's so bad.
Dang it. Yeah, Cal's
no.
like, I'm out.
Yeah,
I give up.
there we go. Was it that bad, Cal?
nah, it's
He
a whole-
rage quit over this one.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
That's actually a great point, though. One of the things I think is very common with like a PTZ on a pole is that any kind of movement transfers, especially when you're zooming in on that PTZ, transfers a ton
Mm,
on that image. So if you don't have your
Mhm.
pole steady and strong in the ground and cemented and everything, and you guys can probably go into more of it, you're going to see a lot of wobble if you're keeping that PTZ zoomed in, and just the slightest vibrations can be enough to really impact that image, the way it looks and the compression, everything like that, actually.
mhm.
So I'm wondering
That's
how
something that
stable
you
that
don't
is.
learn by not making that mistake 100 times. You know, I mean, newer installers do not think about that until you really show them a PTZ that's super zoomed in, that's way above the
Mhm.
flag.
How are we giving this grade here?
Like a B, maybe.
Gosh, I'd give it a C.
Really?
I mean, the longevity issues because of the wood combined with the exposed cable, like
Yeah.
it's one of those, I call it like functional for now kind of installs.
True.
I mean, we haven't quite worked out our grading rubric. We should probably
Yeah,
all agree
right.
on that at
Go
some
with
point.
that. Yeah. Gil, how do you feel? You get kind of a tiebreaker here, it looks like.
so I should say C plus.
Well, we made this has since been corrected, so we apparently called it an F.
That is-
Very good way of
Yeah. I mean, you know what? It'll last as long as it lasts, you know, so it could last, 6 months, and it could last 3 years, who knows? But it's this is a testament to having the right devices with the right equipment. If the post was what we told them we needed size wise, then they wouldn't need the wood block, and the pole mount adapter would fit perfect. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the bottom line, is just make sure everything works with everything beforehand, and then we don't have to like create a scenario
Mm-hmm.
to try to install it.
Right, definitely. Good, be a good, good rule of thumb. Go ahead and kind of like put it all together before you mount it, so you know that you have everything that you need, and everything fits together well before you actually attach it to the structure.
Yeah, agree.
Is that a C plus or
It's still a C plus.
C plus? All right. Next one then.
Mm.
So this is kind of an interesting one. I actually saw this at a certain big box warehouse store kind of thing, and thought it was pretty interesting. I guess my first question with this one is, I'm calling this one Old Yeller. How did this happen? Like what's going on here?
Sun damage.
That's an excessive amount of grime.
I just think it's sun damage. I think it's because the sun is hitting the top of the dome, but not the bottom.
Yeah, but I think that sun damage and the discoloration though is that it has to be caused by the presence of some kind of moisture that evaporates when the sun passes
Mm,
through the dome. So maybe it's not perfectly attached and sealed tightly, so there's some moisture that's getting in there and evaporating.
is that
Could
some
be.
sort of aftermarket cover on like the
It's
ring
not
itself?
seemed perfectly connected to me when I was looking at it.
Okay,
I should have got
okay.
another angle, but yeah, I mean, how so we kind of know maybe why it's happening. Some sun, some moisture. Obviously this camera's probably not seeing very well at this point.
I'd be surprised if they're saying anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, how do you fix this? Like, okay, now we're in this situation. Before we talk about how you prevent this, how do you actually fix this? What can you do?
Oh, you'd have to replace the bubble. I
Yeah.
mean, I've gone through
Yeah.
plenty of that with jobs in the South, Florida, especially Southern California, Arizona. I mean, that happens all the time, to be honest. I've
Yeah.
seen that a lot. So yeah, I mean, you can try those headlight things. We've had people do that.
Hmm.
You know, there's that kit where
Mhm.
the headlights have like damage and you can buff it out. I've had people try to do that.
I've also
But in
seen
my
people,
eyes, yeah.
like when you try to get that grime off the dome, you can damage it even further, like scratch it. If you try to use like a Brillo pad
Mm.
or something to get it off,
Yeah.
then you just scratch it and you're in the same place you started.
Yeah, so let's go backwards, I guess. And like, how do you prevent something like this? Is there anything you can do? Should you just, if you have dome cameras, or can you buy I know we sell the dome parts separately and stuff. Is that a good idea to maybe have a couple on hand if you have a big install, or like how would you prevent this in the first place, I guess? I know I just asked like three different questions.
I wouldn't use a dome bubble. I wouldn't use a dome style if your environment's like that. But there are domes that have sun shields also.
Mhm.
Not sure if we have those or can get those.
We will soon.
Soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that you see how that top half is the discolored part? That's what the sun shield would be. But it all
Mhm.
depends on what your view is, because if the sun shield is going to cover your view, then you can't use that. Then you got to go to a turret or something.
Yeah, and you've also, I mean, in terms you got to make sure you followed your basic dome installation steps, like dealing with moisture and making sure everything's properly sealed when you put it back on. But the sun damage, not really going to change based on taking those steps.
Right.
One thing I should note about this one too is that you can see that obviously this dome is flat on the wall like that. There's wasn't much or any awning on this building either. So it was just sort of
Mhm.
exposed to all of the elements. You have the rain dripping
Mhm.
all over it as time went on. And of course, when the sun hits it and the sun's just
Mhm.
beaming on it, there really wasn't any protection from the actual building part as well. So it, kind of an extreme environment for that camera. Um, that being said, when we do install dome cameras, do we, we typically see them on like soffits or on ceilings,
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
When you are mounting on a wall, what kind of precautions are you kind of looking for that? Obviously, the shields will have those at some point, but what are some other things you might want to take note of when you're installing it?
Well, that particular one's not installed bad. I mean, the wire's coming in
Mhm.
straight from the back. They've had to use no conduit or anything, so that's fine. To me, it's just a case of, I mean, if you're insistent on using a dome with a dome bubble, I think the only way you get away from that is if you put it on a wall mount, so it's facing downward. Of
Mhm.
course, then you're taking on the risk of vandalism, because anytime you have a mount on a wall, it can be pulled down. But in essence, most of the time it's not. So if that's a concern of yours, I'd do that if they've already bought the dome bubbles. But I just wouldn't use a dome. I would either use a turret or a bullet camera.
And I think probably the reason this is contacts you guys don't have at the moment, but it was right near like an entranceway too. So that's probably why they were considering using the dome, because they wanted
Mm.
less likelihood of potentially vandalism, I guess, even though, this is sort of the end result of it, I guess. I do like the idea of the wall mount. That seemed like it would have probably prevented this and still
Yeah.
needs that, but there's only so much you can do to prevent some level of vandalism if the camera's within reach, the SWAT zone, as we've said. So, that being said, this is less of an install thing and more of a camera thing. What are you guys grading this? Is there an applicable grade for this one? Just a lesson? Like,
I couldn't blame the installer for this, really.
no.
Install wise, it's a solid B plus.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell just from this image though, but I mean, like a couple of extra beads of silicone around the seals might have kept the moisture out and, prolonged this amount of sun damage, but definitely not the installer's fault, just camera placement and model choice.
Yep. Agree.
Agreed.
All right, so number 3, we kind of, is what it is at that point, and you definitely probably should be replacing that dome cover. But not a bad installation, we don't think. Move on to number 4 then. And this one we've got 2 bullet cameras sort of connected here. What's your first kind of look at this? What are your first impressions?
Looks really clean.
Not bad. I mean, my OCD tells me that they're not mounted at the exact same height, which is killing me a little bit.
I wonder if that's like the lens distortion a little bit too, potentially.
I was gonna say, because if you trace the grout, they're like
Right.
right on the grout in an identical place. I think
Yeah,
they actually are mounted evenly.
I see what Cal's saying, because the one on the left seems a little higher in the grout line than the one on the right.
I think you're nitpicking here.
Yep, that's what we do.
we should give bonus points for lack of alligator clamps here. I think that's part of the
Yeah,
new
yeah,
standard of
yeah.
grading.
Is that bonus points or are they losing points?
yeah, not sure yet. I get a couple questions about this. Like, we have like, for somebody who does new installation or doesn't kind of know where wires are going and stuff, we've got the camera here on the left, and then we got it attached by, what is this metal thing called?
Line box.
Line box.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Often used at the point where you will begin pulling wire through the conduit. Oh, it
Which
is
does
not
not
a
appear
junction
to be
box.
what's happening here.
Yeah, no, I would
Yeah,
imagine
it
that
is.
both cables are coming through behind one of the electrical box mounts for the camera, but that
Mhm.
little 90
Right.
LB or elbow or whatever you want to call it, I mean, it has a cap on it to where they say the cables are coming, both cables coming through the electrical box mount on the right. You can pull to the left camera through that little elbow around the corner, so you're not putting
Mhm.
any undue stress on the cable when you go from one box to the other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a little overkill just for that distance because it's only like 3 feet, but it still looks good and it's easier to service that way.
It's also probably easier to put together because you're not having to do a 90-degree bend. And if you're dealing with a crew that's just not as comfortable with bending conduit, that's a decent workaround.
Well, it's
So-
designed to help pull the cable through, like Cal said.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? But it's not designed to connect cable. That's what a junction box is for. At least in the electrical.
Mm.
So just to be
LB
clear,
is
there's most
pull-through.
likely one hole, so to speak, going into that, and that's one of the reasons why you do that, is so you don't have to put quite as many exterior holes on the building. So instead of having 2 of them, we've only got 1.
Right.
Okay, that's
Which
Right.
is
one
a
question
good way to
might
do it.
have.
Yeah. And I mean, the longer piece of conduit has a 1-hole strap in
That's
the middle
right,
of
yeah.
it, properly supported. This looks really, really good compared to the last couple.
What
Oh,
grade?
I
are we
give it
giving
an
that?
A.
I'd
I mean,
definitely give it an A.
if you said first glance, do you have any problems with this? I'd be like, move on.
Mm.
Yeah,
This is great.
yeah.
Yeah.
Was that A's across the board?
A's
Yeah.
across the board.
Cool, cool. All right, this next one is a doozy. We got multiple pictures here. I may even have to sort of explain what's going on. So we're in at least I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, where SW's headquarters is, and I'm walking around. We have what's known as the Flatiron Building. It's basically like a
What in
miniature
the-
version
All
of the
amount.
one in New York City, and I see this camera kind of on the balcony
Is
slash
it in the tree?
iron, and then the cable just sort of like going out. Now, I will say that in fairness, the building is currently going under pretty heavy renovations and all that kind of stuff, but then I just had to follow the cable, and like it's going down from the camera, sort of like just straight down, no supports whatsoever or anything. It goes across kind of the building. It's
It's
right in
tucked
the
in the corner in between the granite.
yes.
Look at the picture of, I guess it's on the middle row, the far right. Does the cable go in that one window and then out that
Mhm.
other one?
I think it
Um,
wraps around a stick, sticking out of the window. Or maybe I don't know. I give up.
Well,
It
let's
kind of
break it
goes, you
down.
see, like it goes down. I should have done a little video now that I think of it, but like it goes down. This is like some investigative stuff here, but like it goes down and then it's just like there at the so once you see the tree there, and if you look
Mhm.
below the tree or kind of near the tree, you'll see that same entranceway that's in that next photo. And so like it
Mm.
just sort of just goes straight down. Like there's kind of nothing, there's definitely no support. Like you said, I think it's like in between the granite and but yeah, obviously that cable is I could swing off that one if you want. But then at the final bit, it kind of goes into the window and then I think it went up. Like one of them went into the window and one of them went up somewhere on the roof.
Crazy.
So
Yeah, I see it now.
Can't believe it.
Hit me lazy. But I will say, as
can't
far
even
as the
believe
camera mounting, though, that
Yeah,
unit
I
strut
would
and
say,
threaded
can we
rod,
talk about that?
not terrible. I mean, if I had
It's
to fab something
multiple
from scratch,
unistruts.
what
Do you see
is
that?
that?
so it's a small segment of unistrut that's using like nuts, bolts, and washers to attach to the railing of the balcony, and then they use threaded rod, which was also attached with nuts, bolts, and washers to extend out and basically create their own, wall mount for this bullet camera.
I
Great.
just can't. It is ingenious.
I mean, no cable support whatsoever, the whole thing, but the camera mounting is solid.
I like how if you look very closely at the image labeled Flatiron Spaghetti #1.jpg, you'll see that in the corner of the building there, it's like kept up by literally just like they kind of shoved it in the corner, and then there's enough like to keep
A
it
little gap
totally
in the
following. Yeah,
granite blocks. Yeah.
That's great. They just tucked it in there and left it. That's wonderful.
yeah.
And then
I
they use
mean,
one zip tie right here above this one window to go
Oh, so they
straight
had
down.
heard of zip ties.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, maybe the Flatiron building, with it being a historic building like that, they had some kind of ordinance like no penetrations or no drilling or anything like that. I mean,
There still has to
an
be a
excuse,
better way to do
but-
this.
I'm guessing that's what happened.
that's actually a really good point. I wonder if that was the case. What are some things they could have done to clean this up? Like obviously this is looks like a temporary solution here. It doesn't seem like something they're maybe going to be relying on very much long term. But like what it seemed like for a little bit of effort, they probably could have done a lot better with it. Having exposed cable outside is not great, but the fact that it's so easy to get to is really where the big concern would be, right?
Mhm.
What could they have done to clean this up with minimal effort potentially? I mean, could they just grab duct tape and put them on,
No, I mean, if I were them, like, just go inside. Just bring the cable inside. And if you can't bring the
Mhm.
cable inside, then keep it high the whole way. I mean,
Yeah.
don't use duct tape because that will become unstuck and you'll be right back where you started.
I mean,
But
so we're presuming you cannot drill into the facade, and that was why this is done so oddly.
yeah,
Then going inside is really your only viable option.
That, or if you want to get real creative and use some like indoor rated Panduit, but replace the adhesive on the back with something like Flex Seal, something like really strong. Because the commercial
Mm,
says those can patch
mhm.
boat holes and stuff like that. And, stay
Yeah, and if we're
high.
assuming it's temporary, that would fulfill that kind of.
So that kind of brings me up to the next thing. Is this even in code, or is this even legal? Or is this like, what's the
No,
situation here?
not at all. I mean, it's not like none of it's supported. I mean, that's your main issue, is that none of your cable is supported.
No, no one. Am I still sound weird?
No, you're
No,
good
no,
now.
you're good.
Yeah.
Just
No one,
snitch on the
obviously
flat
no
iron.
one's enforcing it, whatever the code or law is. You can, if you look close, you can see tape at certain intervals on it. So I think they tried to tape it at one point.
Good
And it just
catch,
came
actually. Yeah,
down.
you see like there's
Yeah.
certain like
Oh
discoloration on the cable.
yeah.
Yeah,
Left in the window there.
just, I don't know. It's all, I mean, the wiring is just an F minus, all bad. It's,
Mhm.
what else can you say? The
Yeah.
mount, kind of cool.
I mean,
Mount, I give
ugly, ugly as sin, but
it gets it away from the rail and gets them the shot they want, and it's,
yeah.
I've seen worse. I'd give it a B plus, but yeah, the wiring's bad. Like, yeah,
So I guess probably all across the board, this is an F overall installation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like Cal said, you got to get it inside somehow, man. You just have to.
I'm surprised it's not already like pulled down in that case. Like
Yeah,
my brain was just telling me swing across those, swing on them, like see what happens. Like
Spider-Man.
now I gotta record this. You
how
know?
has nobody messed with that? You know
I
what I
don't
mean?
know. Yeah,
Like
that's
that door with the graffiti, like just walk out and slap it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
wah, wah. Yeah,
Should we start an over under on how long it lasts and just send you back out every week to
Right.
check?
yeah. That would be a good
That's
YouTube
funny.
series.
Hey, let's
It's
do
gonna
a
be a-
1 year time lapse.
Yeah.
I think there's some good bars like right around the corner, man. You can just stop by on your way to what's that? The Cuban one right there on the corner.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you can just I'd be surprised if I know it's and I think the point with this is it might be temporary. Yeah, this building's under renovations, but minimal effort could have been made to make this a lot better. That's kind of the main
Yeah.
point of it. Yeah. So ingenuity was there for sure with that mount, but not a good installation whatsoever. So and that brings number 5. Let's bring up the last one, which I think is pretty sneaky. This actually isn't a camera installation. Our first one that's not camera related. I remember you guys talking about this. What is going on here with this one?
Ooh.
I'm
Oh,
out.
yikes. Oh, dear.
Yeah. So for all of you electrical inspectors that watch these in the trenches videos, I'm sure you're loving this right now.
Yeah, that's some lovely stropping to the outside of high voltage conduit.
Yeah.
So what we got is high voltage conduit, and we've got what looks like PoE injectors for a Ubiquiti device,
Mhm.
which it's
Yeah.
going to send. What I guess there's probably multitudes of issues here, but what's the number one issue you're going to experience with this?
You're gonna
Interference.
interference, yeah.
Yeah. With the high voltage stuff. I mean, I'd be really surprised if those antennas work for any amount of time.
And when they work, it's gonna be spotty.
Yeah.
I'm also like twitching at like how abrupt that bend is on the cable itself, with them like looping back on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
We did talk about that the last time, bend radius, which is, now that I know it, it's basically you want them to keep that so it doesn't bend and end up damaging the cable over time. That's some pretty tight ones, looks like on that one.
Have they mounted that switch to something that's just zip
Yeah.
tied in?
So they mounted that switch, which I think they used zip ties to mount the switch to the unistrut used to support the conduit from the electrical install.
Oh, Lord God.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. It's bad. Real bad.
I think I know what job this is too.
Mm-hmm.
So this is interference. you know, if you have a wire and going a little bit into what this wireless infrastructure is going to do, most likely this person has cameras in an off building that doesn't have a network connection, and they're wirelessly being transmitted through that Ubiquiti technology to the other one. And you know, that's how those cameras get signal. So with that interference, we're going to get potentially it's just not going to work, period, right? It could end up dropping packets, and what that means is the camera's going to be very inconsistent. It might drop off your NVR, may not be accessible. You have to go and reboot things all the time. Not going to be a reliable installation of a security camera. Why do you think they did this, and what's the alternative?
Laziness.
Yeah, either they're lazy or they didn't know better, I guess. And I mean, I think they just also the outlet that's pretty close at the bottom right of the image. They probably needed an outlet, and they were like, "Oh,
Mhm.
found one. Let's just put everything here."
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
I mean, they
What's the
should have.
al-
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, what's the alternative for that? Where should they put this?
I mean, it needs to be a certain distance away from the high voltage. What is the exact code? I don't remember off the top of my head.
No,
18
that's
inches? 24?
that's open track, but if it's horizontally ran, I think it's 8 to 12 inches. But you can parallel, but you can perpendicular run it closer. But I forget the
Mm,
They should have installed an entire separate backer board, like
Mhm.
away from the electrical stuff somewhere, just for the telecom, camera, access control, whatever kind of equipment they have on site in this electrical room.
I should put the switch and the inline surge protectors on that backer board.
Mhm. Yep, fire rated backer board away, maybe on another wall from that conduit.
Hmm.
This is sort of a sneaky one too, because you know most people might look at that and not realize, that that's not a problem. So I can see maybe somebody wasn't familiar with what high voltage can do to data signals and everything else. Any other comments on it before we give it a grade?
They've labeled one of the cables. That's nice.
There is a tag.
There's
Nice.
a tag,
Uh,
but only on one of them.
Yeah, what
And it
you
looks
think?
like they're not the
What
only-
grade you giving this?
looks like they're not the
well,
only ones that did
I'm
that
giving
well.
it an F because the functionality is compromised and it's nowhere near to code.
Yeah, for sure.
Pretty simple, right? Yeah, I think that's a very fair grade there. And again, I think like one of the things we've seen for a lot of these is like somewhat minimal effort would have been able to prevent most of these, right? I think like
Mm,
a little bit of expertise, a little bit of extra work, you could do the solution you just mentioned, different backing board somewhere on the other wall. The PTZ one, making sure you get the right size pole. Making sure you figure out where the camera should be located. I think like that's the main thing I take away from these ones. Is that it really wouldn't have taken a lot for these to go from, "Ooh, it's kind of bad and we
mhm.
don't know how long it's going to last or how well it's going to be working," to that's a pretty good installation that's going to survive for years to come. It really wouldn't have taken a lot of effort, I think.
It's
So
effort and it's the right tools. Like they sort of look at this and they're like, well, zip ties are the answer to everything in this situation. It seems like, and having backer board would have meant you don't need the zip ties. You can properly mount things. So there's a knowledge gap here, would be my guess.
So what you're saying is if they would have had a really good, experienced project manager just to guide them, to get them the materials, makes all the difference, man.
It can. Sometimes the best project managers don't know what other people don't know until they start asking questions about how someone's going to do something. But
Very true.
because I could
Yeah.
see assuming that a technician knows not to strap things to high voltage wires and not
That's not
thinking
true,
to
though.
say that to somebody.
To be
Yeah.
honest with you,
Yeah. Okay.
there's people strapped to conduit all over the place all
Yeah.
the time.
I mean,
And never get called out, and the
Yeah.
systems function okay. This
Mhm.
happens a lot because they
Yeah.
have nowhere else. they're quickly trying to install stuff and they have nowhere else to tie it to. And they
Mhm.
just, that's what they
You just
do.
do it.
Pull
Yeah.
out the bag of zip ties and start strapping it up. And
I sent James pictures of the cameras in my gym and they're all strapped to high voltage wires the whole way down.
wires or conduit.
I'm sorry, conduit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still bad, right? And it's still against
Yeah.
code, but it's at least there is some kind of blockage of the, RFI that's coming through. But it's still, no matter what, it's against the code, but no one polices it. People do it all the time. You see it everywhere.
Well, that's changing though, because the reason it happens and the reason people get away with it is because when buildings are being built, the electrical inspection sometimes
Oh,
is
yeah.
done before our trade even gets in there. And
Yeah,
so
you
the
can't.
electrical inspector doesn't even see the camera or data work sometimes, and it gets by. But I mean, obviously that's changing more and more as the, general
Yeah.
contractors are taking into account our trade when they're designing, building the buildings.
For new construction, absolutely. But anything you add to a building or retrofit,
Mhm.
unless there is an inspection, it usually makes it through. Most of your standard customers going to walk up and go, "Oh, that's pretty neat."
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Tidy.
yeah, you could actually, I could see where somebody would think that, and that's where
Absolutely. They're like,
Having
"Oh,
it-
that's nice and tidy, out of the way. That's fine."
I think that's where having expertise on the ground and in management roles, like Cal said, there is going to be the key. Because like the biggest problem I see with this, and I'm thinking of it from the technical support standpoint now, is like these cameras are going to consistently have issues. Like it might not be all the time,
But they're
it's
gonna be subtle. They're gonna be hard to
it's
figure
gonna
out.
be
Like,
this is gonna be a lot of troubleshooting before somebody's like,
go take a picture
go
of.
take a picture of the injector on this. We're gonna think there's something wrong with potentially the nano beam because
We might end up RMAing multiple pieces of equipment on
Yeah.
this
This
until
is
somebody sends us this picture and we go, oh,
Right.
So if you're not on the ground there and you don't know that that's what's happening there, I wouldn't assume that that's happening, and I would start looking at the equipment. And that's and you want your security cameras to be reliable, and I think that's this is going to be one that's not going to be reliable until they move that potentially, and that would be my biggest concern. You're looking into a lot of troubleshooting, frustration, time spent, equipment, unless somebody knows about this. That's kind of the
Right.
crazy thing about it. So, yeah, any other final thoughts or anything about kind of these cameras, installation, last words?
Common sense.
Follow code. Take your time. Be
buy
thorough.
alligator clamps.
Be consistent. Buy alligator
Flex Seal. Inadvertent
Harbor
advertisement.
Freight's always got a deal on something.
All right. Well, if you want professional installation that doesn't use gator clams, you can definitely give us a call. We'll help you out. You can do it nationwide. Things up here, or maybe it's up here. Who knows? We'll see. You can give us a call, getscw.com. Thank you, panel, for being here and grading these and give some critique and how we could have fixed them and laughed at some of them. I thought it was pretty fun, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Awesome.
Bye.
Bye.